In the course of 50 years, everyone ends up with secrets they'd prefer no one else know about. On a show with a cast as diverse as SNL, those little secrets add up. These are the weird stories, feuds, and controversies that have gone on behind the curtain of this legendary show.
It's hard to believe, but Saturday Night Live has been on the air for over 40 years. In that time, the show has logged a massive number of memorable musical performances, and a gig on the show can still make or break an artist's career. As the AV Club put it, SNL is easily the single most important television show on which not to bomb. In the cases of the following acts, a poor showing ended up putting a real damper on their futures. Irish singer Sinead O'Connor caused a major stir in 1992 when her SNL performance evolved into a hugely controversial political statement. At the end of an a cappella rendition of Bob Marley's War, she ripped up a photo of Pope John Paul II and then said,
"Fight the real enemy!"
SNL producer Lorne Michaels was left to deal with more than 4,000 angry phone calls to NBC, and O'Connor was subsequently banned from the show. Amidst the backlash, she spent the rest of the decade making music, though nothing became anywhere near as popular as the 1990 hit single, Nothing Compares to You. In 2003, she announced her retirement from music, though that proved to be short-lived. In 2010, O'Connor explained her beef with the Catholic Church, justifying her performance as a protest against priestly abuse. Writing in the Washington Post, she said, "I knew my action would cause trouble, but I wanted to force a conversation when there was a need for one. That is part of being an artist." We haven't heard too much from Ashlee Simpson lately, but back in 2004, she was still pretty relevant. But that all came crashing down on SNL. As Simpson started her second performance of the evening, the pre-recorded vocals for her first song, Pieces of Me, started playing. Panic-stricken, she did a weird little jig and then slipped off the stage as a band played on. At the end of the show, Simpson offered a hasty explanation.
I feel so bad my band started playing the wrong song, and I didn't know what to do, so I thought I'd do a hoedown. I'm sorry.
She later revealed that she'd been suffering from severe acid reflux and her father had insisted that she use a backing track. Afterwards, Simpson's career took a major dip. She did appear on SNL a second time the following year, but to little fanfare. After seeing more diminishing sales, Simpson has not released an album since 2008. Her personal life has remained busy though, as she's been married twice and has 2 children. If you've never heard of Carmen, there's a good chance their widely criticized 2012 Saturday Night Live appearance has something to do with that. The husband and wife duo of Amy and Nick Noonan originally found viral fame with a series of covers on YouTube, but on SNL, they performed 2 original compositions, and critics subsequently ripped them apart. Spin's Mark Hogan said, "This was hip-hop even Mitt Romney could enjoy, though he seems to have a little bit more personality." In the years afterwards, Carmen's albums barely charted and their career fizzled, leaving SNL viewers to wonder if they just imagined the whole thing. Since then, the band has gone on hiatus to focus on Amy's solo career as a new persona, Queen Herbie. Appearing on the January 14th, 2012 SNL, Lana Del Rey's incredibly stiff performances of her songs, video games, and Blue Jeans were swiftly and widely panned. As Rolling Stone put it, her shaky, slightly dead-eyed Saturday Night Live debut was treated like a national emergency, inspiring weeks of debate. The reaction on Twitter at the time was brutal, with actress Juliette Lewis saying, "Wow, watching this singer on SNL is like watching a 12-year-old in their bedroom when they're pretending to sing and perform." Hashtag sign of our times. It was so bad that the show addressed the situation the very next episode with Kristen Wiig as Del Rey.
And I failed to reach the high bar set by past guests like Bubba Sparks, the Baha Men, and Shaggy.
But this story has a happy ending as Del Rey ultimately survived what could have been a career-ending gig. In fact, her career has been flourishing. Her album Born to Die was certified platinum, she's been nominated for multiple Grammys, and she's collaborated with The Weeknd and Stevie Nicks. For fans and critics alike, that SNL performance is now little more than a distant memory.
Live from New York, it's Saturday night!
Saturday Night Live has been a cultural institution for half a century, but even its most beloved cast members couldn't stick around forever. Whether they were fired or left by choice, the show's most popular players said goodbye to Studio 8H for all sorts of reasons. As the first anchor of Saturday Night Live's faux newscast, Weekend Update, Chevy Chase typically introduced the segments with his signature intro.
Good evening, I'm Chevy Chase, and you're not.
Thanks to Weekend Update, his show-opening pratfalls, and his bumbling impersonation of then-President Gerald Ford, Chase became the first breakout star of the original, not ready for primetime players. Chase was also the first member of the original cast to exit the series, leaving partway through SNL's second season. It was widely assumed Chase left to pursue a movie career, as his first big-screen starring role came with 1978's Foul Play. However, he later revealed the real reason why he bailed on SNL years later in 2007, telling Today, "I left for a girl that I was in love with. It had nothing to do with lucrative film deals awaiting me. I was very much in love with a girl who just would not leave California." The comedian offered more details in a 2011 interview with the Los Angeles Times, recalling how he was infatuated with his future ex-wife Jacqueline Carlin, saying, "She would not move to New York and insisted that I come there. It was all nuts, looking back on it, but I did regret it." Every single member of the original Saturday Night Live cast left, along with series creator Lorne Michaels, after the show's 5th season. This led to NBC hiring a new producer, Gene Dumanian, and a whole new cast. The result was a season that is generally agreed to be one of the show's worst. Yet, one moment from that otherwise forgettable season remains legendary. When cast member Charles Rocket, during an episode outro, dropped an F-bomb on live television. By that point, ratings had nosedived, and it had become painfully clear to anyone watching that SNL had become an unmitigated disaster. Dumanian was fired after the incident, as were several members of the cast. Rocket, predictably, was among them. Dumanian told The Hollywood Reporter of the firings, "That was an excuse. I just thought it was quite unfair." While Rocket continued to work steadily in comedy following the infamous incident, appearing in films like Hocus Pocus and Dumb and Dumber, he was tragically found dead in a field near his home in 2005. The medical examiner ruled the death a suicide. Gilbert Gottfried had one of the most recognizable voices in Hollywood history, but he wasn't at his most successful during his time in Studio 8H. Gottfried scored a spot on Saturday Night Live in 1980, as part of the all-new cast in the infamous 6th season. This turned out not to be the best career choice. Gottfried recalled on the Joe Rogan Experience, "The idea back then of Saturday Night Live with different cast members? That just wasn't. Now it's like the cast changes every 5 minutes. But back then, it was like, no. It would be like saying, like in the middle of Beatlemania, that, oh, we're getting 4 other guys to be the Beatles." It didn't help that the show avoided taking advantage of Gottfried's wild antics that aced his initial audition. Many of his sketches didn't even feature his signature ear-piercing screech.
"Why did the moron throw the clock out the window? 'Cause he's a freaking moron! That's why!"
Gottfried told Rogan, "I remember I didn't like the writers and the writers hated me, and so one time to prove it, how much they hated me, they wrote a funeral sketch where I was the dead body, so I just had to lie there in the coffin." The sketch served as a suitable allegory for the fate of that cast, as most of them were purged after that horrific season. Lucky for him, Gottfried's comedic career flourished after that experience. These days, Harry Shearer is best known for providing the voices of Mr. Burns, Principal Skinner, and various other characters on The Simpsons. He also holds the rare distinction of quitting Saturday Night Live, not once, but twice. Hired as a writer-performer for the 1979 to 1980 season, Shearer wound up quitting shortly after he was hired. He used 2 words to describe his experience to IGN: living hell. Nevertheless, Shearer returned to SNL 5 years later during the 1984 to 1985 season. When asked why he would do this return given his previous experiences, Shearer explained that when he and his This Is Spinal Tap co-stars, Michael McKean and Christopher Guest, performed on the show as their fictional rock alter egos, they were treated so well that he believed the culture had changed.
I believe, and I think it goes for everybody in the band, that a man's relationship with the devil is a very private affair.
That feeling proved to be short-lived, as Shearer admitted in an interview for the SNL oral history book, Live from New York, "I was pretty miserable for virtually the entire season." When Shearer finally quit the second time, SNL's then-producer, Dick Ebersol, put out a press release announcing that the comic had parted ways with the show due to creative differences. In the book, Shearer declared that when a reporter called asking for comment, he'd quipped, "Yeah, I was creative and they were different." Julia Louis-Dreyfus is one of the most recognizable women on television, thanks to her award-winning roles in Seinfeld and Veep. But her 3 seasons on SNL were far less acclaimed. They weren't particularly enjoyable either. As she said on Radio Andy, I didn't have tons of fun, but I did learn a ton. I was really super young. I was 21 and I went into it very naively. She also told Bustle that SNL was, quote, not a female-friendly environment at all. She recalled that it was difficult to get her sketches aired on the show. One saving grace was that her tenure on SNL enabled her to work with castmate and boyfriend Brad Hall, whom she would eventually marry. Louis Dreyfus discovered another silver lining during her time on the show, meeting writer Larry David, who would later co-create a star vehicle for her in the form of Elaine on Seinfeld. She joked, "He was there my 3rd year, his one and only year, and we bonded because he was super miserable, and I was super miserable, and you know how misery loves company." Arguably, one of Saturday Night Live's most beloved seasons was the 10th, which brought heavy hitters Billy Crystal and Martin Short into the fold. While Crystal delivered memorable characters ranging from Suave Fernando to talk show host Joe Franklin, Short resurrected such SCTV favorites as Ed Grimley and Jackie Rogers Jr. Despite their success on the show, neither returned for the 11th season. As it turned out, they never intended to. As Short explained in Live from New York, "I had a 1-year contract. I certainly approached that show not as someone who was going to be around, obviously for more than 1 year. So I felt that I had to do a lot and be in as many interesting things as possible, because it was just a limited time." Crystal said, "I never put a time limit on how long I would be there or what it would give me or get me. I just felt personally as a performer and as a creative person, I had to give it my shot." Dennis Miller joined the cast of Saturday Night Live in its 11th season, taking over the Weekend Update anchor desk. With his wry delivery and endless quiver of obscure pop culture references, Miller's quirky comedic style proved to be a hit with viewers until his exit in 1991. Miller's next move was to host a late-night talk show, The Dennis Miller Show, which debuted in January 1992. In an interview with the Chicago Tribune to promote the show, Miller explained why he left SNL, saying that the arrival of his son made him reset his priorities and cast a wider net career-wise.
You're not going to come back every week and hang out on the set like Lovitz, are you?
No, I'm really going, Lauren.
Because that would be really pathetic.
Miller elaborated, "I'm not trying to sound too maudlin, but something about his birth reacquainted this urge in me to strive for things. When I had the kid, I thought, why don't you see what you can do? Why don't you test it a little? Make the boy proud." That test, unfortunately, was not successful. By July of that year, The Dennis Miller Show was canceled. Speaking about the show's failure with the Los Angeles Times, Miller shrugged it off, musing, "People lose their jobs every day." Robert Downey Jr. might be immortalized as Iron Man, but the actor hardly had a metallic grip on comedy when he joined Saturday Night Live for a single season back in 1985. SNL was slumping in the ratings as NBC tried to retool the show. Lorne Michaels returned after a 5-year hiatus, bringing in a fresh roster of players that included Downey. There was only one problem. Downey was too green to take on something as frenetic as a weekly live sketch comedy program. He said in a 1991 interview, "I really learned a lot. It was also just crazy. I mean, I guess I was like 19 or 20. It was tough and I learned a lot, and I don't complain on film sets nearly as much as I should because of that experience." The good news for the show was that the addition of cast members like Nora Dunn, John Lovitz, and Dennis Miller helped steer SNL out of troubled waters. By his own admission, Downey had nothing to do with that turnaround given his lack of grounding in improv or sketch comedy. He reminisced on Off Camera with Sam Jones. But I would still say to this day that there's not a more exciting 90 minutes you can have, whether you are any good or not. It's just amazing. Ben Stiller joined the cast of Saturday Night Live in 1989 and quit after just 4 episodes. During a 2018 interview with The Howard Stern Show, the actor-director explained that he left the series because his primary ambition at that point was to direct short films. When Stiller was hired for SNL, he was under the assumption that was what he'd be doing, making comedic short films that would air between live sketches. Instead, he found himself performing on live television, and he hated it. Stiller told Stern, "I knew that I wasn't good live because I would get nervous. I just felt I couldn't do well in that situation." However, there were no hard feelings, as Stiller subsequently returned to host the show twice and appeared in 2018 as President Donald Trump's former lawyer, Michael Cohen. This came about when Stiller emailed SNL executive producer Lorne Michaels asking for tickets to the show. Stiller recalled, He sent me back an email the next day saying, "Sounds fun, great, and oh, by the way, do you happen to have a Michael Cohen impression lying around?"
For too many years, I was loyal to a man when I should not have been. Now I know how Khloe Kardashian feels.
Saturday Night Live has never been afraid to rock the boat, but few players were as subversive as comedian Chris Rock. When Rock joined the cast in 1990, his in-your-face delivery portraying characters like activist Nat X and unhinged news correspondent Buster Jenkins made him a standout in a cast already full of heavy hitters. While Rock made a huge impact on the show after only 3 seasons, being one of the only black cast members made him a novelty that prompted SNL creatives to put him in stereotypical roles. Meanwhile, Rock admired the largely black-dominated cast of their rival show, In Living Color, which delivered edgier sketches featuring more diverse characters. Rock recalled on WTF with Marc Maron, "The people at SNL are the nicest people ever. I'm friends with everybody there." So it wasn't that. The reason for wanting to be on In Living Color was just hip, man. History showed that I had a sense of humor in me, but I was never going to be able to do that stuff at SNL. Whether Rock was fired or left SNL on his own accord is still debatable. But either way, he managed to land a spot on In Living Color for the series' final season before it was canceled. Another short-lived Saturday Night Live cast member was Sarah Silverman, who was a featured player for a single season in 1993 and 1994. Despite her subsequent success in film, TV, and stand-up comedy, her tenure on the show was as forgettable as it was brief. In a 2005 interview with The Believer, Silverman even didn't want to discuss the experience because she felt it was boring, but she did reveal that she learned she'd been fired via fax machine. Bob Odenkirk, who was an SNL writer at the time, shed some light on Silverman's brief time on the show in her profile in The New Yorker that same year. He said, "I could see how it wouldn't work at SNL, because she's got her own voice. She's very much Sarah Silverman all the time. She doesn't really do character voices. She puts out stuff that she would appreciate, and then you can like it or not. She doesn't give a." Adam Sandler and the late Chris Farley were among the new talent brought aboard Saturday Night Live in the show's 16th season, and during their 5 years on the show, they both proved to be standouts. Despite being 2 of the series' most popular cast members at the time, Sandler and Farley were both fired before the 21st season, leaving them both feeling blindsided. Sandler discussed the experience during an appearance on The Howard Stern Show, saying, "At the time, I was hurt because I didn't know what else I was gonna do. But I remember when I saw Farley, he said to me, 'Me too. They don't want me either.' We were both like, this shit. We got mad together, pretended we weren't sad, and pretended this was for the best." Sandler also addressed being axed in a monologue song when he hosted SNL in May 2019, marking the first time he'd been back since being let go.
Maybe they were sick of Canteen Boy, but I think they just hate the Jews.
In Jay Moore's Saturday Night Live tell-all book, Gasping for Airtime, he recounted his tumultuous 2 seasons on the show as an anxiety-ridden, self-medicating mess who struggled, mostly unsuccessfully, to get his sketches on the air. One of those sketches that did make it into the show, however, ultimately led to his downfall. As Moore explained, he wrote a sketch about father and son innkeepers after watching a stand-up routine from comedian Rick Shapiro, and admittedly cribbed it word for word. After the episode aired, Moore was called into a meeting with SNL executive producer Lorne Michaels and supervising producer Ken Imong, who asked if Moore had ever heard of Shapiro. Moore lied and said that he hadn't, at which point Imong played a recording of Shapiro's original bit. Moore remained adamant that it was a coincidence. Shapiro ultimately sued, receiving an undisclosed settlement that included the sketch being scrubbed from all future broadcasts. Moore wrote, "Undoubtedly, I should have been fired, but I wasn't." He was, however, let go at the end of the season in 1995. Moore didn't disagree with the decision, continuing, "What I did was inexcusable, and no apology in the world could ever make up for it." Al Franken was part of the writing staff of Saturday Night Live's first season in 1975. He remained on the show as a writer-performer for decades, but he decided to leave after losing out on the Weekend Update anchor spot to Norm Macdonald in 1994. He had bigger ambitions in mind. Franken took his political satire outside of Rockefeller Plaza, publishing his bestseller, Rush Limbaugh is a Big Fat Idiot, and Other Observations. In 1996, In 2004, he began hosting his own political radio show. In that show's final episode in 2007, Franken made a big announcement. He was running for a Senate seat in his home state of Minnesota. In 2009, Franken was elected to the Senate, declaring victory after a recount in what was a very tight race. He was re-elected in 2014, but his political career came to an infamous end in 2017, when he announced he would be resigning after several allegations of sexual harassment were leveled against him. In his resignation speech, Franken said he remembered some of those accusations very differently, claiming, "Some of the allegations against me are simply not true. I know in my heart, nothing that I have done as a senator, nothing, has brought dishonor on this institution." Norm Macdonald joined Saturday Night Live for its 19th season in 1993, taking over Weekend Update anchor duties a year later. One of Macdonald's most frequent targets was former NFL great O.J. Simpson, who had the attention of the entire country during his murder trial. Long-standing rumors claim that Macdonald's jokes about Simpson were ultimately what led to his firing in 1998.
Thanks, I'm Norm Macdonald, and now the fake news. Well, it is finally official. Murder is legal in the state of California.
Macdonald's barbs often went for the jugular, which reportedly rankled powerful NBC executive and personal friend of O.J., Don Ohlmeyer. Interviewed for Live from New York, Macdonald recounted being told he would no longer be anchoring Weekend Update. The reason, he was informed, was because Ohlmeyer said so. Macdonald decided to call Ohlmeyer directly, who confirmed that Macdonald was done. No mention was made of Simpson, however. Ohlmeyer reportedly told Macdonald he was let go because his segment was, quote, just not as funny as it should be. In hindsight, Macdonald said that he was simply happy that he was able to be on SNL at all. He looked on the bright side, saying, "To me, just getting there was the thing." One of the most coveted gigs on Saturday Night Live is a position as an anchor on the news segment Weekend Update. It's a job that turned previous players like Chevy Chase, Tina Fey, and Seth Meyers into household names. But Colin Quinn found that his time behind the desk left a sour taste in his mouth. As he admitted on The Howard Stern Show, "I should have just left after a few shows. I should have said, I can't do this. Whatever the energy was that I was bringing, I couldn't enjoy it. I loved my first 2.5 years of Saturday Night Live, loved it more than anything. And doing the update thing was just ugly." Quinn's unhappiness had a lot to do with the circumstances surrounding how he landed that spot. His predecessor and best friend on SNL, Norm Macdonald, had been fired, and Quinn was quickly ushered in to take his place. TV pundits often rate Quinn among the segment's worst hosts, in sharp contrast to Macdonald, who is frequently rated among the best. Quinn happens to agree. He continued, "I feel like I even sabotaged it because I felt so guilty, even though I had nothing to do with Norm leaving. But it was still, wow, I'm taking Norm's thing after they fire him for this whole thing." Quinn left SNL in 2000 and has since found passion in converting his comedy into Broadway productions. In 1995, Sherry O'Terry joined Saturday Night Live at a very opportune time in the show's history. In response to dwindling ratings the previous season, producer Lorne Michaels got rid of the bulk of the show's cast, replacing them with O'Terry and other soon-to-be iconic players, including Will Ferrell and Daryl Hammond. Filling those voids meant that O'Terry and company were entering a workplace far less toxic than previous seasons. O'Terry recalled on the Fly on the Wall with Dana Carvey and David Spade podcast, "Everybody came in at the same time, and there was this appreciation and energy, and we just all hit the ground running. There wasn't anybody that was sitting around intimidating and wondering if you were going to take their spot or anything." O'Terry thrived in that revitalized workplace, showcasing characters like the spunky cheerleader, Ariana, and the easily annoyed Nadine.
Simmer down now. Excuse me? Everybody want to return something, so just simmer down now.
5 years later, confident from being nominated for a Primetime Emmy in 2000 for her guest appearance on the sitcom Just Shoot Me and a role in Scary Movie, O'Terry left SNL with hopes of becoming a major star. That prospect never truly materialized, as she settled for bombs like Dumb and Dumberer, When Harry Met Lloyd, and a handful of TV cameos. Nasim Pedrad joined Saturday Night Live at the start of the 2009 season and exited 5 years later. It didn't take her long to find work. Immediately after leaving the show in 2014, she was cast in Mulaney, a Fox sitcom starring and created by former SNL writer John Mulaney. During an appearance at the Television Critics Association summer press tour that year, Pedrad explained her decision to quit SNL, saying, "Obviously, there's nothing like that show, and I was lucky to be there for 5 years. At some point, you have to leave, and I can't think of a better reason to leave than for this particular show and this particular cast." Despite the talent involved, Mulaney was trashed by TV critics. One review from Slate read in part, "Mulaney is just like Seinfeld, except it's not funny." The show was canceled after a single season. Nevertheless, Pedrad remained a hot commodity on television, eventually creating and starring in the TBS sitcom Chad. Taran Killam was hired by SNL in 2010, and in 2016 his contract wasn't renewed. As the actor explained in an interview with Uproxx, he was surprised by his firing. As he put it, "You signed for 7 years, so I had 1 more year. I had sort of had it in my head I would make this upcoming year my last year, but then heard they weren't going to pick up my contract. I was never given a reason why, really."
Had a good run while it lasted, didn't we, Chief?
We sure did. We sure did.
Since then, it's not like Killam has been hard up for work. He appeared in several movies, including the 2017 big screen comedy Killing Gunther, which he also directed and wrote. Killam also starred in the ABC sitcom Single Parents, which ran from 2018 to 2020. In an interview with the I Was There Too podcast, Killam claimed that the show became less collaborative and more competitive after Seth Meyers left to host his own late-night show. Killam stated, "When Seth Meyers left the show, the dynamic changed quite a bit. He was the last person there who I witnessed really collaborate with Lorne, as opposed to just kind of do what Lorne says." The 2016 announcement of Taran Killam's firing from Saturday Night Live was accompanied by that of Jay Pharoah, who, like Killam, had been a cast member since 2010. A year after his firing, Pharoah spoke out about his exit from the show during a radio interview on Hot 97, musing, "You go where you're appreciated. If you have multiple people on the cast saying things like, 'You're so talented,' and 'you're able,' and they don't use you, it's unfair and it's making us feel bad because they don't use you and you're a talent." Pharoah followed up his SNL stint by starring in the Showtime comedy White Famous, which ran for a single season in 2017. He's had plenty of other gigs, but unfortunately his biggest headline since his departure had nothing to do with acting. In 2020, Pharoah was accosted by LAPD officers while out on a run. He was mistaken for a suspect and detained, as an officer handcuffed him and knelt on his neck. Pharoah questioned during an interview with Gayle King, "Why does it have to go to that extremity?" Luke Knoll's time on Saturday Night Live was so fleeting that most viewers probably don't even remember him. Knoll had joined the show at the start of the 2017 season, but was let go before the next one started. During his single season, Knoll did have a few standout moments, like when he portrayed a heavy metal fan who meets with a surgeon in hopes of getting his demon-style horns removed.
"You know how your dad and your brother won't speak to me?
Yeah?
I think it's because I'm a human man with horns."
Speaking with Vulture after his SNL exit, Knoll reflected on his brief tenure with the show, saying, "I was only ever there 1 year. I had 1 season, and you definitely have a lot of questions looking back. Did I do something wrong? Was I not writing good enough stuff? Honestly, looking back, knowing how the show works, the mechanisms and the politics and its energy, it's a very tense and stressful place. No one there is having fun," air quotes. While Knoll was quick to admit that it was tough to break out in a cast packed with insanely talented performers, he also wondered why he hadn't been given more of a chance, saying, "So it was hard to leave and not think I didn't get much of an at-bat." Bobby Moynihan joined Saturday Night Live in 2008, quickly becoming a fan favorite thanks to his original characters like Drunk Uncle and impressions like Jersey Shore star Snooki. Moynihan left the show of his own accord in 2017 and immediately landed the lead role in a CBS sitcom, Me, Myself, and I. While promoting the show at the 2017 edition of the Television Critics Association summer press tour, Moynihan opened up about his decision to leave SNL, saying, "The day you get SNL, you start worrying about your exit from SNL. That was always on my mind. I was an acting major in college. I would like to show people I can play a grown man instead of just dressing up like Rosie O'Donnell." Me, Myself, and I wasn't the hit Moynihan had hoped for, and it was yanked off the air after just 6 low-rated episodes. Moynihan still landed on his feet, though. In addition to numerous TV guest spots, Moynihan became a series regular on the Ted Danson-starring NBC sitcom Mr. Mayor, and has proven to be a prolific voice actor, with credits including DuckTales and Star Wars Resistance. There were clearly no hard feelings on either side about Moynihan's SNL departure. Moynihan returned in 2022 for a surprise appearance on that year's Halloween episode, reprising Drunk Uncle and other characters. Vanessa Bayer became a Saturday Night Live standout during her 7-season stint on the show, beginning in 2010 and concluding in 2017. Her decision to leave the show, Bayer told The Hollywood Reporter, came about from the realization that she'd simply been there long enough. In her words, "It felt like it was time for me. I had 7 seasons and just felt like it was time for someone else to do that job." The absolute favorite of all her characters, Bayer revealed, was Jacob the Bar Mitzvah boy. She explained, "He feels the closest to my personality. The shyness and awkwardness is at the core of me."
Moses spoke with God for 40 days. About the amount of time my mother spends on the phone with my Aunt Hillary.
Bayer's post-SNL roles have included multiple episode guest spots on Brooklyn Nine-Nine and NBC's Will and Grace revival. She also headlined her own Showtime comedy, I Love That For You, which was loosely based on her own experience as a survivor of childhood leukemia. As for how her fellow cast members responded to her exit, Bayer told HuffPost, "I feel like everyone was supportive and will miss you, but we understand. It's a very hectic schedule, so it's like, after 7 years, I want to take a nap." Most SNL players at least make it to airtime before they get fired, but that wasn't the case for Shane Gillis. In September 2019, a Saturday Night Live press release announced that he was one of 3 new hires. And almost immediately after the announcement, a clip of Gillis using racially insensitive terms for Asian Americans on a podcast began to circulate online. Backlash ensued, while more examples of Gillis using offensive language emerged. SNL executive producer Lorne Michaels acted quickly and decisively. Within days of Gillis's hiring announcement, Michaels revealed that he was unhired. A spokesperson for Michaels said in a statement to CNN, "We were not aware of his prior remarks that have surfaced over the past few days. The language he used is offensive, hurtful, and unacceptable. We are sorry that we did not see these clips earlier, and that our vetting process was not up to our standard." Gillis responded in a since-deleted tweet, writing in part, "I'm a comedian who pushes boundaries. I sometimes miss." Nevertheless, Gillis eventually did get to spend some time in Studio 8H when he hosted the show in 2024.
I probably shouldn't be up here, honestly. I should be home. I should be a high school football coach. That's what I should be.
Fans of Saturday Night Live were saddened to learn in the summer of 2019 that writer-turned-cast member Leslie Jones wouldn't be returning for the show's upcoming season. According to a Deadline report, the decision to leave was entirely her own. Jones then confirmed her exit on social media, expressing her hope that the fans she'd gained from SNL would support her future endeavors. The first of those projects was Leslie Jones' Time Machine, her debut Netflix stand-up comedy special, which dropped in January 2020. In addition, Jones was hired to host ABC's revival of the classic TV game show, Supermarket Sweep. Speaking with the New York Times, Jones explained why she decided to exit SNL when she did. Her reasoning was simple. As she put it, "I'm 52 and tired. SNL is a hard job. It's 100 hours a week. Also, it's an institution. I get bored, and I want to do different things." Beck Bennett was one of 6 actors hired for the cast of Saturday Night Live in 2013, and quickly established himself as the go-to guy for quirky impressions, satirizing everyone from Tom Brady to Vladimir Putin. But there was one character type he played more than any other.
No! You need me! Who's gonna play the dumb idiot?
When Bennett announced his departure on Instagram in 2021, he wrote, "Thank you for 8 years of remarkable people and incredible experiences that completely changed my life." Speaking with Time, Bennett recalled performing on stage, glimpsing his wife, Jessie Hodges, sitting in the front row while the series creator Lorne Michaels looked on smiling. As he put it, "It really felt like the universe was telling me, this is in fact time for you to leave. You're not going to do better than this." Another factor was that his wife lived in Los Angeles, while SNL is filmed in New York City. He continued, It's been 8 years of basically long distance with my wife. And if we are going to start a family at any point, I think we have to start that at some point soon. In 2022, the couple finally welcomed their first child. In 2014, Pete Davidson was one of the youngest ever people to join the Saturday Night Live cast at just 20 years old. He quickly made a mark with his Weekend Update appearances as himself, but eventually became a tabloid staple thanks to his string of relationships with famous women, including Ariana Grande, Kate Beckinsale, and Kim Kardashian. Thanks to his breakout status on the show, Davidson hit the big screen with roles in The Suicide Squad and a star turn in The King of Staten Island, the 2020 Judd Apatow directed feature loosely based on Davidson's real life. In May 2022, Davidson announced via Instagram that he was leaving the show. He wrote in part, "I owe Lorne Michaels and everyone at SNL my life." He also joked to Gold Derby, "It is my 7th year, and that's what the contract is usually for. I started there with acne and left with tattoos."
So are you officially leaving? Yeah, man. Lorne accidentally gifted me a sock, so I'm free.
Despite heaping praises on Lorne Michaels and the show, Davidson also got candid about the harsh competition behind the scenes. As he said during an appearance on Live Your Truth, an honest conversation with Charlemagne the God, "As far as everyone else, it's a cutthroat show. Everyone's trying to get their on. Everyone wants to be the next thing." Kate McKinnon was a Saturday Night Live MVP during her 10-year run on the show, thanks to impressions of celebrities, ranging from Justin Bieber to Hillary Clinton. During her tenure, McKinnon had also established herself as a sought-after actor outside the show, in films like 2016's Ghostbusters and Office Christmas Party. She was Carol Baskin in the Tiger King-inspired TV series Joe vs. Carol, and voiced Miss Fiona Frizzle in Netflix's reboot of The Magic School Bus. McKinnon's decision to leave the show in 2022 didn't come lightly. She revealed during an appearance on Live with Kelly and Ryan, "I thought about it for a very long time, and it was very, very hard because all I ever wanted to do in my whole life was be on Saturday Night Live. And so I did. I loved it. I had the best decade. And then I was just like, my body was tired. And I felt like it was time." Asked what she planned to do with her Saturday nights, McKinnon admitted that it would probably be some time before she tuned in to watch any new episodes. She joked, "I think I'm just going to tape The Bachelorette and watch that instead." Joining Saturday Night Live in 2016, Melissa Villaseñor quickly became a standout for her eye-popping array of celebrity impressions. Over the course of 6 seasons on the show, she channeled everyone from Lady Gaga to Owen Wilson.
Oh, wow, yeah.
Villaseñor's decision to leave was spurred by anxiety attacks she'd been experiencing since becoming part of the SNL cast. During an interview with Daily Beast's The Last Laugh podcast, she said that she felt her exit was necessary to preserve her mental health. She admitted, "Last season, I had a couple of panic attacks. I think it was just, I was struggling. I always felt like I was on the edge of a cliff every week, and I was like, I don't want to be doing that to myself anymore. And it's not like the show was mean toward me or anyone. It was just how I handle things." After her SNL exit, Villaseñor branched out into new territory by releasing her first book, called Whoops, I'm Awesome. She told Entertainment Weekly, "I like telling people it's a book for an adult's inner child." Aidy Bryant's SNL journey began in 2012, and she made a name for herself playing a very specific type of character before she left the show a decade later.
I have played dozens of teachers, principals, mothers, women named Diane, Susan, or teacher.
Bryant's 2022 departure was actually later than it would have been if it wasn't for the pandemic, as she revealed to Variety. "If it weren't for COVID, I probably would have left a few years earlier, when COVID hit. It was so jarring that we were all like, I'm definitely going to come back next year." However, Bryant's commitment to her Hulu series, Shrill, of which she was star and co-creator, forced her to miss several episodes that season. She continued, "I kept trying to seek one last normal year. This year wasn't the normal year that I hoped for, but it was closer to that. It was like, okay, it's really time now, and 10 felt like a nice, solid round number." As for what lay ahead, Bryant explained that fans were more likely to see her create another original project than see her become an actor for hire. She told Variety, Everything that has worked for me has been by writing it myself. When Cecily Strong appeared in her final episode of Saturday Night Live in December 2022, she'd been a cast member since 2012. Her send-off was celebrated on Weekend Update, where her recurring character Kathy Ann announced that she was finally being sent to jail for her many crimes.
I got to have so many of the best moments of my life in this place with these people that I love so much.
Strong shared a statement out of character in a subsequent Instagram post, reflecting on her decision to leave by writing, "I am ready to go, but I'll always know home is here. I've had the time of my life working with the greatest people on earth." Strong also apologized for keeping the news under wraps until the last minute, but explained, "I didn't want the extra pressure on something already so emotional for me." Thankfully, Strong's fans didn't go hungry for long, as she and comedian Keegan-Michael Key starred in the movie musical spoof series, Schmigadoon, for Apple TV+. Aristotle Atari may have lasted only one season on Saturday Night Live, but the show's first male Middle Eastern player still managed to make his mark, with characters like the artsy improv crooner Angelo and the android stand-up Laughingtosh 3000.
It's very hard to date as a robot. My last girlfriend was a GPS.
Unfortunately, the Texas native found it difficult to gain his footing when he joined in 2021 for season 47, especially due to pandemic precautions and the sheer size of the cast. He explained on the Saturday Night Network podcast, "It was a very large cast. It was like 21 people in the cast. There's a finite number of spots that you can get for dress rehearsal. And the table reads, I think at the time, they were difficult in a lot of ways because we were still masked and separated, and there were growing pains in that regard." Atari believes he might have stayed if he were as connected as players like James Austin Johnson and Sarah Sherman, who also made the cast that year. He added, "I just didn't know anybody. I think that would have also helped a lot if I was familiar with some of those people." Atari wasn't out of work long after leaving in 2022, having snagged a role in the sci-fi rom-com Molly and Max in the future.
Saturday Night Live is probably the most stressful show on TV, and with that stress, of course, actors and staff will occasionally butt heads. Even if the feuds managed to stay backstage, they definitely had an impact on the show. Here are the members who couldn't stand each other. Chevy Chase and Bill Murray were among the earliest and most notable cast members of Saturday Night Live, but they weren't regulars together. According to Far Out, Chase left the series after about a year, and Murray was his replacement. Chase made his triumphant return to SNL as a guest host in 1978. Coming in with what he called in the oral history Live from New York a quote, egocentric attitude. As a result, Chase clashed with multiple cast members, particularly Murray, who knew him from when they worked on National Lampoon per Decider. After many nasty things were said, Murray made a verbal jab at Chase, whose marriage was in a rocky place. Chase retorted by commenting that Murray's scarred face looked like the surface of the moon. Moments before SNL went live on the air, Chase cornered Murray in John Belushi's dressing room and a physical fight broke out, with Belushi having to separate them. News of the fight entered SNL lore, and when Chase hosted the show again in 1980, he and Murray attempted to dispel the so-called rumors by performing I Shot the Sheriff together. First season SNL breakout star Chevy Chase left the show after slightly more than one season and very quickly started appearing in movies. He returned to the show to host 8 times, including once in 1985 when he openly and viciously antagonized multiple cast members. Chase approached Robert Downey Jr., son of indie filmmaker Robert Downey Sr., and according to Live from New York, said, "Didn't your father used to be a successful director? Whatever happened to him? Boy, he sure died, you know, he sure went to hell." Downey Sr. was still alive, it's worth noting. He saved some truly audacious vitriol for Terry Sweeney, the first openly gay cast member in SNL history. In Live from New York, Sweeney recalled Chase approaching him with a repulsive idea, with Chase reportedly saying, "I've got an idea for a sketch for you. How about we say you have AIDS and we weigh you every week?" Producers were so incensed by Chase's comments that they forced him to say sorry, which Sweeney said made Chase furious. The last time Chevy Chase showed his face at Saturday Night Live was a cameo in a March 2013 episode. That's more than a year before Pete Davidson joined the cast of the show, and even though their paths didn't cross, they still managed to forge a feud. In a September 2018 interview with the Washington Post, Chase profanely criticized the show that made him famous.
But I'll just say, maybe off the record, I'm amazed that Lauren has gone so low. I had to watch a little of it, I just couldn't effing believe it.
A few days after the Post article, Davidson was a guest on Howard Stern's satellite radio show, and the host asked him to respond, which he did, saying, "Chevy Chase, I hate that dude." Davidson noted that Chase seemingly ruined, quote, "a really big career with his attitude." What really bugged him was how disrespectful Chase's comments were to SNL creator and producer Lorne Michaels. Eddie Murphy is arguably the most prominent star to ever have their career launched by Saturday Night Live. Thanks to his domination of the show in the early 1980s, the hilarious and charismatic young Murphy went on to star in mega hits like Beverly Hills Cop and The Nutty Professor. And unlike most every other SNL cast member turned A-list film actor, it wasn't until 2019 that Murphy returned to the show to host. The main reason for his absence? Mid-90s SNL cast member David Spade. In a 1995 installment of his snarky talking head segment Spade in America, Spade made a quip over a photo of Murphy, star of back-to-back flops Beverly Hills Cop 3 and Vampire in Brooklyn.
"Look, children, it's a falling star. Make a wish." Yes, that's right.
Murphy told Rolling Stone in 2011 of Spade's cheap shot. "What really irritated me about it at the time was that it was a career shot." In the mid-90s, Saturday Night Live underwent a major cast overhaul, bringing in new talent like Will Ferrell, Molly Shannon, and Chris Kattan, with a holdover from the old cast being Norm Macdonald, primarily the show's caustic, deadpan Weekend Update anchor. When Rolling Stone profiled the new SNL ensemble in 1997, Macdonald made a point of going after Kattan, derisively questioning the Mango portrayer's sexuality, seemingly out of nowhere. Macdonald also went on to say that he didn't think Kattan was funny. Kattan initially brushed off his co-star's comments, jokingly responding with his own insult to Norm. In 1999, after Macdonald had left SNL and returned to host, Kattan, still a cast member, did not appear in the episode, with a source telling The Observer, "They had a very acrimonious relationship. Norm would rip Kattan to his face." And for his part, Kattan would reportedly pester and berate Macdonald just before he'd go on air. In the late 90s, Clueless director Amy Heckerling was in negotiations to helm A Night at the Roxbury, starring Chris Kattan and Will Ferrell as those two odious dance club regulars who bobbed their heads to Hathaway's What Is Love in a recurring Saturday Night Live sketch. In his memoir, Baby Don't Hurt Me, Kattan claimed that SNL and A Night at the Roxbury producer Lorne Michaels was so desperate to sign Heckerling that he encouraged Kattan to accept her romantic advances, which he had previously rejected. Kattan said that he did as Michaels had asked and began an affair with Heckerling, who ultimately produced but did not direct A Night at the Roxbury. Once production on the movie was completed, Kattan wrote that Ferrell didn't speak to him for months, then confronted him backstage at SNL, and Kattan recalled him saying, "I didn't call you back because I didn't want to talk to you. I don't want to be your friend anymore. I'm going to be professional and still work with you on the show, but that's it." Ferrell didn't explicitly state his reasons, but Kattan understood that his co-star was disgusted by his strange affair with Heckerling. In 2009, years removed from Saturday Night Live, Tracy Morgan published his first book, I Am the New Black. He reflected on his time at SNL in the mid-90s and early 2000s and dished the dirt on which cast members he didn't like, Chris Kattan and Sherry O'Terry, writing, "All I have to say about that is, where's Chris Kattan now? Where's Sherry O'Terry now?" According to Gawker, when Morgan recorded the audiobook version of I Am the New Black, he elaborated and improvised on his SNL friends and enemies, noting that he considers Will Ferrell, Colin Quinn, and Molly Shannon his friends, but definitely not O'Terry and Kattan. Tracy Morgan was a cast member on Saturday Night Live from 1996 to 2003, his tenure largely overlapping that of young comedian and impressionist Jimmy Fallon. While Fallon had some breakout recurring characters, he's likely best and most remembered for collapsing into giggles or hysterical laughter in one sketch after another. It can be argued that laughing, or breaking as it's also known, can ruin a sketch, and Morgan certainly thought Fallon's behavior did just that. In a 2007 interview with Penthouse, Morgan suggested that Fallon would crack up on purpose to put the spotlight on himself, and also that he hated it, saying, "That's taking all the attention off of everybody else and putting it on you like, oh look at me, I'm the cute one." Morgan also pointed out that Fallon didn't laugh through sketches they appeared in together because Morgan told him not to. This feud seems to have resolved at least. Morgan was a guest on Late Night with Jimmy Fallon 11 times and has appeared on Fallon's The Tonight Show on 6 occasions. In 2011, The Oprah Winfrey Show hosted a large group of Saturday Night Live All-Stars, including Tina Fey, Dana Carvey, and Jane Curtin. When Winfrey asked about gender politics in the workplace, Curtin, one of the original members in 1975 and one of the first Weekend Update co-hosts, described an atmosphere of sexism and hostility to women.
Jane, you ignorant.
According to Curtin, co-star John Belushi believed that, quote, women are just fundamentally not funny, and alleged that the late SNL star intentionally sabotaged pieces that were written by women. Curtin reiterated her experiences with Belushi on Watch What Happens Live in 2018, explaining that the actor was among a group of men on the show who thought that, quote, women should not have been on SNL. When host Andy Cohen asked if Belushi thought SNL standout Gilda Radner had comedy chops, she said that he did, but he didn't classify her as a woman. She was Gilda. Dana Carvey was probably the biggest star on SNL in the late 1980s. When Mike Myers joined the show in 1989, he brought along a character he'd originated on Canadian television and recruited Carvey to play his sidekick. Together, they made Comedy Magic, Wayne's World, a cable access show hosted by Myers' Wayne Campbell and Carvey's Garth Algar. The sketches performed so well that they spawned 2 movies. In 1997, Myers created another comedy movie franchise with Austin Powers' International Man of Mystery. In the parody of 1960s British spy movies, Myers portrayed swinging, groovy super spy Austin Powers, as well as the villain Dr. Evil, who spoke with a pronounced and exaggerated Canadian accent. According to Carvey on The Howard Stern Show, Myers' Dr. Evil voice was his take on Carvey's impersonation of their SNL boss, Lorne Michaels. He also allegedly took Dr. Evil's habit of raising a pinky to his lips from Carvey's Michaels impression, saying, "Lorne doesn't do that, but somehow it fit, the pinky thing I did." Carvey resented Myers for years, and the latter did admit to The Hollywood Reporter, "The Dr. Evil voice is a little bit Lorne Michaels. There are no two ways about it." Carvey never confronted Myers, but he claims he did go over it with his therapist. Saturday Night Live creator Lorne Michaels took what became a 5-year leave of absence from his show in the early 1980s, and NBC put associate producer Gene Domanian in charge. When Michaels left, so did the entire cast, many of them with SNL from its beginning, meaning Domanian could hire a new roster of players per Live from New York. According to Doug Hill and Jeffrey Weingrad's Saturday Night, Domanian was most excited about Charles Rocket and predicted he'd be the biggest star among the bunch. But the breakout star of the early 80s SNL was not Charles Rocket, it was Eddie Murphy. Perhaps resentful of the success and popularity that came so easily to his co-star, who had joined the show at age 19, Rocket was openly scornful and dismissive of Murphy around the SNL offices. Nora Dunn and Victoria Jackson were among the small group of women to be a part of the Saturday Night Live cast in the mid to late 1980s. They didn't do much for each other, and the rest of their co-stars seemingly didn't like either actor as well. With John Lovitz recounting in Live from New York, Dunn fought with a lot of people. She fought with me the first year, and then the second year she started again, and I said, "I'm not going through this with you for another year." He then recalled a time when a sketch with Dunn and Dana Carvey ended with those two actors, quote, just screaming at each other. Jackson thought Dunn was the single biggest flaw on SNL, well, her and another co-star. An SNL producer gathered the cast of this era for a meeting to pinpoint problems with the show, and Jackson recalled, "No one was saying anything. I stood up and told everyone what was wrong with the show was those two women. I pointed to Nora and Jan Hooks, and all the things they did bad. They didn't cooperate in sketches, and they slammed doors in people's faces and backbite and backstab and all that." Dunn and Hooks slipped out of the room, and Jackson called out the rest of the cast for not backing her up. That reportedly prompted Carvey to quip, "You didn't hear anyone disagreeing, did you?" Few shows inspire as many amateur and hot takes from viewers as much as SNL does. Every episode has its share of funny moments and misfires alike, but rarely is one episode so poorly received that it earns bad marks across the board from a wide swath of fans. According to user scores on IMDb, the lowest rated and most hated SNL episode of all time is the February 2005 installment hosted by reality show star, hotel heiress, and general purpose celebrity Paris Hilton.
Say what?
Publicly presenting herself as an entitled, spoiled diva princess had already made Hilton a polarizing figure. But that attitude is apparently not for show, and one that also rubbed SNL writers and cast members the wrong way. On Howard Stern's satellite radio show in 2006, Tina Fey bluntly labeled Hilton a quote piece of who embraces her stupidity. Fey also said Hilton pitched a sketch idea in which she could portray Jessica Simpson because she didn't like the singer and because, quote, she's fat. Another gemstone plucked from Fey's chat with Stern, she so hated the week she spent writing comedy for Hilton that she criticized the size of her hands and claimed she left, quote, nasty wads of Barbie hair on the floor that fell out of her cheap weave. When a non-performer hosts SNL, such as an athlete or politician, audiences can almost expect a mediocre episode. Expectations may not have been high when the news broke that SpaceX and Tesla Motors billionaire Elon Musk would host an episode of SNL in May 2021. Musk wasn't particularly well liked at the time. He'd been in the news for spreading COVID-19 related misinformation and attempting to stop his employees from unionizing. As the Wrap noted, even SNL cast members voiced their displeasure. A.D. Bryant tweeted a Bernie Sanders quote about the, quote, moral obscenity of the wealth of billionaires, while Bowen Yang's Instagram story dispatched a screen cap of Musk's tweet, "Let's find out just how live Saturday Night Live really is," with the caption, "What the f*** does this even mean?" A source close to the show told Page Six that SNL producer Lorne Michaels wouldn't make his actors appear in sketches with Musk if they didn't want to, which from the sound of the ideas Musk floated on Twitter, didn't seem great. Ratings spiked for the episode, but there were two controversial moments. After joking in Weekend Update that Dogecoin was, quote, a hustle, the value of Musk's advocated cryptocurrency dropped by 22%. And the soap parody Gen Z Hospital, which on the surface seemed to consist entirely of young people spewing neologisms for 4 minutes, earned backlash on Twitter for likening African-American vernacular English to vapid hipster slang. The cool, sophisticated, compelling 60s set Mad Men was at its Emmy-winning peak in late 2009, and seeing as how star Jon Hamm had already hosted Saturday Night Live to acclaim a year prior, the show brought in cast member January Jones. Now, Jones is a solid comic performer. However, she didn't thrill TV reviewers with her sketch comedy work on SNL. In fact, Jones and her episode earned some of the most savage feedback the show had ever faced. A critic from Vulture singled out Jones for being, quote, dull, and said it was one of the more stale installments of the venerable program in years. That publication also took Jones to task for a sketch where she played Grace Kelly during the making of the classic movie Rear Window. The twist? The impossibly elegant and graceful Kelly has come down with a nasty case of flatulence in a sketch deemed, quote, uninspired and juvenile. The AV Club was even more pointed in its criticisms, calling Jones' work, quote, as chuckle-inducing as a Holocaust memorial and severely wooden. The reviewer wrote that, she stared at those cue cards so intensely, I'm surprised she didn't burn a hole right through them. Unlike most rock star guys of the 1970s, Frank Zappa didn't take himself very seriously, nor did he take much seriously. The rocker and composer laced hefty amounts of wit, silliness, and satire throughout his music. All that made it seem like Zappa could be one of the few musicians who could roll into Saturday Night Live as a guest host and handle its rigorous comedic demands. SNL booked him as host and musical guest for an October 1978 episode, which, all things considered, surprisingly entered show lore as, quote, one of the worst ever, according to writer and performer Don Novello in Live from New York, the complete uncensored history of Saturday Night Live. The show night dress rehearsal reportedly went badly, a common occurrence on SNL, but Novello said the experience left Zappa reeling and dreading the live broadcast. Zappa's solution? Call out the phoniness of TV, or make himself look above it all if anything tanked, Novello recalled. He read the cards like he was reading the cards. He made a point of it. He was obviously reading the cards. That was his approach to the humor. No one else in the sketches knew it. He added that the experience, quote, really upset producer Lorne Michaels, who banned Zappa from returning to SNL. Saturday Night Live is the last TV variety show standing. When it debuted in 1975, it was an edgy alternative to corny variety shows popular in primetime, stuff like Tony Orlando and Dawn. SNL is also one of the very few live shows left, a throwback to stuff like Texaco Star Theater, the 1948 to 1954 series hosted by comedian Milton Berle. According to NPR, the program was so popular, historians credit it for prompting the widespread purchase of TV sets. According to Live from New York, the complete uncensored history of Saturday Night Live, associate producer Gene Domanian convinced SNL boss Lorne Michaels to book the 70-year-old Berle as a guest host. But NBC late-night executive Rick Ludwin said of Berle, he assumed they were doing Texaco Star Theater, and as Milton sometimes did, he took over the production and tried to make it his own. Berle was told repeatedly to not go too broad, but he did anyway throughout the episode, Lorne Michaels recalled. Just before the close of the live show, and it's not a very good show, he said to me, "Don't worry about a thing. The standing ovation is all arranged." Berle was set to sing September Song, and had all 10 people to whom he'd given studio audience tickets rise to their feet in rapturous applause at the conclusion. Michaels refused to allow cameras to show that, and then he prevented the show from ever airing or being distributed for decades.
You love me. You want me. How about this, huh?
In May 1976, toward the end of the first pioneering season of Saturday Night Live, Louise Lasser, star of the popular soap opera parody Mary Hartman, signed on to host an episode. But when she arrived, she didn't like the material. In 2013, she told The Toast, "They wrote sketches for me and I didn't want to do them because they were salacious." This included one where she and cast member Gilda Radner played teenagers discussing sexual issues. She also said that producers backed out on a promise to have the cast perform sketches she'd written. After some poor rehearsals, according to Ultimate Classic Rock, Lasser would only appear in sketches by herself, with a dog, or with cast member Chevy Chase. Suffice to say, the episode, which started off with Lasser heading straight to her dressing room after her monologue a la Mary Hartman, did not go off without a hitch. The final piece of the night was serious and melancholy, adjectives not usually bestowed on SNL sketches. Lasser sat on the floor of the stage and discussed her personal life, including a recent arrest for cocaine possession. It's that bit that prompted SNL producer Lorne Michaels to exclude the episode from rerun packages for years. Lasser told The Toast, "He didn't like me sitting there talking about it, cross-legged on the floor, talking about getting arrested. He hated the show." Bill Hader ended an 8-year run on Saturday Night Live in the spring of 2013, having established himself as one of the most dominant performers in the show's history. He could do almost anything, from imitating Vincent Price, Prince Philip, Al Pacino, and Lindsey Buckingham, to bringing down the house with original characters like club kid Stefan, elderly reporter Herb Welch, and Italian talk show host Vinny Vedecci. When Hader left SNL, fans and Hollywood in general expected big things, and Hader delivered, co-starring in the hit comedy Inside Amy Schumer and heading up the cast of HBO's Barry, a show he co-created that won him 2 Emmy Awards for Outstanding Lead Actor in a Comedy Series. But those projects and more didn't happen until Hader had been gone from SNL for a few years. His first big post-SNL gig was the indie drama The Skeleton Twins, co-starring his former sketch show castmate Kristen Wiig. Around the time of that movie's release in 2014, Hader promoted it by hosting SNL for the first time. Maybe because Hader wasn't yet a big enough star outside of SNL-worshipping comedy circles. But the episode was an absolute ratings bust. According to Deadline, it pulled in the show's lowest numbers in total households that tuned in, as well as in the advertiser-friendly 18 to 49 age demographic.
With love. Yikes.
Never mind what the critics think or what the ratings say. Perhaps the most disastrous hosts in Saturday Night Live history are the ones that the show's performers say are the worst they ever had to endure. Several people from early 90s SNL all agree that the show's least enjoyable host was April 1991 guest Steven Seagal, at the time a wildly popular star of blockbuster action movies like Hard to Kill and Marked for Death. In Live from New York, the complete uncensored history of Saturday Night Live, Tim Meadows said he would complain about jokes that he didn't get. He just wasn't funny, and he was very critical of the cast and the writing staff. He didn't realize that you can't tell somebody they're stupid on Wednesday and expect them to continue writing for you on Saturday. SNL later called out Seagal on the air. When Nicolas Cage hosted in 1992, he appeared in a sketch with Lorne Michaels and expressed anxiety over being, quote, the biggest jerk who's ever been on the show.
No, that would be Steven Seagal.
As one of the most popular comedians and comic actors of the early 1990s, Martin Lawrence was basically a no-brainer for whoever books the guest hosts on Saturday Night Live. As the star and co-creator of the hit Fox sitcom Martin and the host of HBO's stand-up showcase Def Comedy Jam, Lawrence was very visible and had built up a huge fan base for his broad, boisterous, and often profane shtick. When Lawrence hosted SNL in 1994, his monologue portion consisted of a real stand-up comedy monologue, and it would have fit in just fine with his raunchy stage act. He delivered a comical rant about his intimate experiences with women with what he found to be less than stellar feminine hygiene habits. NBC censors found the bit to be so filthy that when the episode aired 3 hours later on the West Coast, the network cut out that portion of the monologue and replaced it with a text crawl explaining the content of Lawrence's commentary and how network policy prevents the material from re-airing. The rest of the episode was not eventful, but shortly after it aired, Lawrence was barred from NBC. However, in a 2020 The Breakfast Club interview, Lawrence said it wasn't a permanent rule. They banned me from NBC at the time for a minute, but then they realized the way it went down wasn't what they thought, and then they sent me an apology letter.
Anything can happen on the unpredictable stage of Saturday Night Live, but that's not always a good thing. Over the decades on the late-night institution, various cast members and guests have gotten themselves into hot water. These are the biggest SNL controversies of all time. In the middle of SNL's first season, creator Lorne Michaels booked a high-profile guest host who would hopefully boost the show's rookie ratings, the ever-provocative Richard Pryor. The episode remains legendary, but at the time, one particular sketch proved to be too shocking for America. Starring Pryor and Chevy Chase, the Word Association sketch features an employer doing a word prompt test exchange with a job applicant. The scene escalates to the point that the two exchange a slew of tense racial slurs back at each other. It ends with Chase casually dropping the N-word and Pryor responding,
"Dead hunky."
Writer Paul Mooney, who penned the sketch, later reflected on its impact and importance in his memoir. As he put it, "It's like an H-bomb that Richard and I toss into America's consciousness. The N-word as a weapon, turned back against those who use it, has been born on national TV." Decades later, Michaels confirmed to the New York Times that the sketch, quote, defined the show and put it on the map. Despite its divisive nature, it remains heavily influential. As comedian Dave Chappelle put it, "It changed everything. Not only TV, but also my course, and it gave me the direction my life was meant to go in." In 2020, an SNL sketch featuring Jimmy Fallon wearing blackface while doing an impression of Chris Rock resurfaced to renewed outrage. In the actual sketch, Regis Philbin, played by Daryl Hammond, is auditioning potential replacements for his departing co-host, Kathy Lee Gifford. Fallon issued an apology for the blackface on Twitter, calling it a terrible decision, and adding, "There is no excuse for this. I am very sorry for making this unquestionably offensive decision, and thank all of you for holding me accountable." Fallon even took a week off from hosting The Tonight Show to deal with the controversy, and he then returned with an episode addressing it.
But the thing that haunted me the most was, how do I say, I love this person? I respect this guy more than I respect most humans.
For his part, Rock heard and understood this sense of love and called Fallon a great guy in an interview with the New York Times. He confirmed that he and his fellow SNL alum are indeed friends, while noting, "I don't think Jimmy Fallon intended to hurt me, and he didn't." He likewise told The Hollywood Reporter, "Jimmy Fallon doesn't have a racist bone in his body," while ultimately writing off the incident as bad comedy. In 1992, the basement-dwelling hosts of Wayne's World aimed an unpleasant swing in the direction of then 12-year-old first daughter Chelsea Clinton. The sketch in question featured Mike Myers as Wayne and Dana Carvey as Garth, discussing the daughters of politicians. While Al Gore's daughters were referred to as Babraham Lincoln should they ever become president, Bill and Hillary Clinton's teen daughter was called, quote, a babe in development. The sketch drew public criticism from viewers and then First Lady Hillary Clinton. Myers reportedly wrote an apology letter to the Clintons, while Lorne Michaels said, "We felt, upon reflection, that if it was in any way hurtful, it wasn't worth it. She's a kid who didn't choose to be in public life." At the time, the Clintons were understandably extremely protective of their daughter and her right to enjoy a personal life outside the public eye. In the week following the sketch, Bill Clinton even commented on Chelsea not accompanying him to a summit meeting in Japan. As he explained, she didn't want to be a big object of public interest. The Wayne's World incident wasn't the only time that SNL may have gone a little too far when joking about public figures. In a 2018 Weekend Update segment, cast member Pete Davidson opened a can of worms when he chose to mock the eye patch of Dan Crenshaw, who was a congressional candidate in Texas at the time.
You may be surprised to hear he's a congressional candidate from Texas and not a hitman in a porno movie.
Crenshaw is a decorated Navy SEAL who lost his right eye in an IED blast while serving in Afghanistan, and he understandably didn't take well to Davidson's cheap shot. He tweeted, "I hope SNL recognizes that vets don't deserve to see their wounds used as punchlines for bad jokes." A week later, Crenshaw made a guest appearance himself on SNL, alongside Davidson on Weekend Update. Davidson apologized, and the two shook hands. Crenshaw then went on to win his election, and Davidson eventually went on to rescind his apology. In his Netflix special, Alive from New York, released 2 years later, he credited himself for making Crenshaw, quote, a household name, and called the joke harmless. He also added that his contrition wasn't sincere, and that he was forced to apologize. Back in April of 1996, the SNL team somehow didn't anticipate that an openly political band by the name of Rage Against the Machine might just clash with the episode's guest host, Steve Forbes. The billionaire publishing executive was hustling a Republican presidential campaign at the time, and he represented basically everything the band stood against. Inevitably, Rage were ready to live up to their reputation, which ultimately meant hanging upside-down American flags from their amplifier grills as a protest against Forbes. It was a gesture that wasn't exactly well received. As Rage guitarist Tom Morello explained to the Los Angeles Times a week later, "We wanted to stand in sharp juxtaposition to Forbes by making our own statement." He also described Forbes as, quote, a billionaire telling these jokes and promoting his flat tax. As Morello recounted, stagehands ripped down the flags just seconds before the band entered the stage to perform their song, Bulls on Parade. They were then asked to leave the building directly after their performance. The group was so livid that bassist Tim Bob threw torn-up pieces of one of the flags into Forbes' dressing room. Morello also called the people working on SNL cowards and bootlickers to their corporate masters. Responding to the controversy, Lorne Michaels simply said, "We really enjoyed having Rage Against the Machine on our show." In 2004, Donald Trump was at the peak of his time hosting The Apprentice. He hosted SNL for the first time that year, and then he returned to host again 11 years later. But the second time around, he was less of a reality TV star and more of a combative presidential candidate. He'd recently made comments about Mexican immigrants, quote, bringing drugs into the country and being rapists, which led to NBC cutting ties with him. But that didn't stop SNL from booking him as host. That decision led to no shortage of outrage. There were protests outside the NBC studios at 30 Rockefeller Center, and following the broadcast, reviews were not kind. USA Today called the episode a disaster and an hour-long campaign commercial, while Vox described it as bland and boring and toothless. After Trump was elected president in 2016, there were accusations that SNL had helped contribute to his electoral success. Comedian Anthony Jeselnik, for one, told the Daily Beast, "I think Lorne Michaels helped get Trump elected." In an interview with NPR, then cast member Taran Killam called the episode embarrassing and shameful, and noted that Trump was, quote, not an enjoyable person to be around. He refuted the idea that the episode helped elect Trump, though he did add, "But there's definitely something where it normalizes him and makes it okay for him to be part of the conversation." The Donald Trump SNL controversy still had plenty of life midway through Trump's presidential term, particularly when Kanye West was the musical guest in a September 2018 episode. At the time of his appearance, West was already courting controversy due to his outspoken support of and reported friendship with Trump. As the episode was ending, West went on a rant about Trump while wearing a Make America Great Again hat. This moment didn't make it on the broadcast, but Chris Rock captured it from the audience and shared it on his Instagram stories. West could be seen pacing on the stage as he unloaded the rant at the audience, while an organ played behind him. He declared at one point, "So many times I've talked to a white person about this, and he'd say, 'How could you love Trump? He's racist.' Well, if I was concerned about racism, I would have moved out of America a long time ago." SNL cast member Kenan Thompson later joked on Late Night with Seth Meyers that West held the cast hostage with his rant after the cameras had cut off.
He voiced his opinion very loudly.
Not a guy who's scared of his opinion. And
no, not at all. And, you know, we're all entitled to our opinion.
Just before the iconic Los Angeles punk band Fear was featured in the era-defining music documentary, The Decline of Western Civilization Part 1, they were simply tearing up their hometown at local shows. In 1980, John Belushi happened to attend one of their sets, and as lead singer Lee Ving later recalled to Rolling Stone, they had a couple of beers and quickly became friends. The comedian subsequently booked Fear for SNL's Halloween episode in 1981. He also hustled together a ruckus of audience members, made up of authentic punk fans, to enjoy cacophonous Fear tunes as Beef Bologna and New York's All Right if you like saxophones. During the band's set, a small-scale riot ensued on stage and consumed everything in its path. Equipment got damaged, and SNL producer Dick Ebersol was even hit by a pumpkin. The final straw was one punk fan grabbing the microphone and yelling, "New York." An NBC technician called the performance a life-threatening situation to the New York Post, which also reported that $400,000 worth of damages were caused. However, Billboard reported that Ving had supplied the figure to the Post as a joke, with SNL spokesman Peter Hamilton confirming that they actually had to pay only $40 in labor penalties. Either way, the infamous performance went down in history, and Ving proudly joined the list of performers banned from SNL. Compared to Fear, legendary ragtag rock band The Replacements dished out a far milder act of punk rock rebellion during their 1986 musical guest appearance, but it nevertheless earned the group a spot on the Banned from SNL list. The inebriated set saw the rockers pumping their amps up excessively loud. Lead singer Paul Westerberg was caught screaming an off-mic profanity, and guitarist Bob Stinson wore a poorly fitted unitard so small that he accidentally flashed his bare behind at the camera. Lorne Michaels was reportedly furious, and he chewed the band members out for their behavior backstage. In the middle of his tirade, he noticed that the band had redecorated their dressing room, and we don't mean that in a cute and wholesome reality TV way. In the band's oral history, All Over But the Shouting, Stinson revealed that Michaels had given them free bar tabs, and that the band really went to town with that offering. As he recalled, they swore no band from Warner Brothers would play on that show again unless we paid the tab on the $1,000 worth of supposed damage we did. The performance is now remembered as both impressive and infamous. As Replacement's biographer Bob Mayer put it to Men's Journal, it was both a brilliant moment and a kind of catastrophe. Though the Replacements haven't returned to the SNL stage, the band did make its return to NBC with a far more subdued performance on The Tonight Show in 2014. You might have noticed by this point that Lorne Michaels is not someone who particularly enjoys moments of unscripted insanity on his show. Oscar-winning actor Adrien Brody was apparently blissfully unaware of this fact during his first, and quite possibly last, hosting stint on SNL in May 2003. That was when he decided to do his own thing while introducing Jamaican dancehall legend Sean Paul as the musical guest. Unfortunately for everyone, Brody's thing consisted of donning a cheap dreadlock wig while speaking in a poorly executed Jamaican accent. He also adopted a persona based on Jamaican stereotypes that involved him making an odd attempt at supposedly Caribbean slang. It might just be the most awkward 45 seconds in SNL history, even when you include Ashlee Simpson's lip-sync debacle. And the awkwardness didn't end there. In a 2012 interview with Moviefone, Brody gave some sharp and brief answers to questions about the episode, during which he admitted he had a great time on SNL and would like to host again. However, he also noted that he'd heard that he'd been banned from the show. Specifically, he said, "I've heard that. I don't know." According to Brody, Michaels didn't tell him anything backstage during the episode, so based on all that he knows, he's not sure how the story of him being banned got out. Not content with simply dropping one controversial statement within her opening monologue, Kristen Stewart showed up for her February 2017 SNL hosting gig and dropped 3. For her first bit of controversy, she took aim at newly inaugurated President Donald Trump. Specifically, she referenced the bizarre set of 11 tweets he'd posted years earlier, which urged Stewart's rumored ex-boyfriend and Twilight co-star Robert Pattinson to dump her because she cheated on him.
So to be fair, I don't think Donald Trump hated me. I think he's in love with my boyfriend.
Stewart then followed up this statement by calling out the president's anti-LGBTQ policies and accusing him of homophobia. As she put it, "Donald, if you didn't like me then, you're really probably not going to like me now, because I'm hosting SNL and I'm like so gay, dude." Though Stewart had previously been open about her dating history, this marked the first time she'd actually confirmed her sexuality publicly, and she did it while openly trolling the President of the United States, so it inevitably raised eyebrows in certain circles. Then Stewart went for the controversy triple crown by ending her monologue with an accidental F-bomb when she got overly excited about being on SNL.
Because it's the coolest thing ever. Oh.
But really, this was the mildest bit of controversy, especially with the various toxic, chaotic, and destructive scenes we've covered so far. 2 years before he confessed to allegations of sexual misconduct, Louis C.K. drew the wrath of the internet in 2015 with an edgy SNL monologue that cracked jokes about child molestation. He recalled a child abuser who lived in his neighborhood during the 70s when he was growing up, and expressed his disappointment that he wasn't targeted by the abuser.
He didn't like me. I felt a little bad.
CK drew the ire of viewers for seeming to express sympathy for predators, while making their abuse sound insignificant. He mused that abusers' actions must feel really good to them if they're willing to risk so much. He also even compared this to the joy he himself experiences while eating Mounds candy bars.
How do you think I feel? It's my last show, probably.
Plenty of people were predictably incensed by the monologue. Numerous publications, including Deadline, asked if CK went too far. Opinions on Twitter ranged from it being, quote, the unfunniest, most offensive SNL monologue ever, to CK being a, quote, comedic genius exploring human nature. Either way, this hardly killed CK's career or his relationship with SNL at the time, as he returned to host again 2 years later. During his time as an SNL cast member in the early 90s, Adam Sandler cultivated his Canteen Boy character, a dim and cowardly assistant scoutmaster with a childlike disposition. During the Valentine's Day episode in 1994, he really pushed the boundaries of the character, in a sketch in which guest host Alec Baldwin played his troop's scoutmaster. In the sketch, Canteen Boy is extremely uncomfortable with the intensifying advances coming from the scoutmaster. Baldwin's character coercively pushes wine on Canteen Boy and forces him to share a sleeping bag with him after he accidentally spills wine all over his bedding. The Boy Scouts of America were largely unimpressed, with a rep telling the Chicago Sun-Times, "We see nothing funny about child molestation, and are surprised that this unfunny subject would be selected for a comedy sketch." For his part, Baldwin revisited the sketch later that same year when he hosted again in December. He reframed the jokes as being about a, quote, perfectly intelligent 27-year-old as opposed to a child. He also mentioned that the NBC switchboard handled more than 300,000 angry phone calls on the night the sketch aired, although NBC denied that they'd actually received a significant amount of complaints.
Since it first hit the air in 1975, Saturday Night Live has been known for pushing the comedic envelope. However, there have been some sketches that went way over the top. Riffing on everything from religion to politics, here are some of the most controversial SNL sketches of all time. How do you explain the cultural phenomenon that was Tim Tebow to folks who didn't experience it? Basically, he was known for two things: playing football and a serious devotion to his religion, which makes a perfect combination for a controversial SNL sketch. In Jesus Visits Tim Tebow and the Denver Broncos, Jason Sudeikis plays a laid-back Jesus Christ who is exhausted with helping the Broncos win game after game. It's interfering with his work attending other events where he's frequently called up, like the Country Music Awards and beauty pageants. By the end of the sketch, Christ exits with a plea for Tebow to take it down a notch with his love of Jesus, a plot point that some Christians did not appreciate. Famous televangelist Pat Robertson claimed the sketch was an example of anti-Christian bigotry. Robertson wasn't alone in his feelings. Fox News' Bob Beckel called the sketch despicable for portraying Christianity in a negative light.
I'm sorry, I'm forgiven.
Fred Armisen's Weekend Update characters include fan favorites like political comedian Nicholas Fane and kitschy folk singer Garth. He tends to get away with pretty much anything, but when Armisen tried his hand at mimicking David Patterson, then governor of New York State, the response wasn't so charitable. Armisen portrayed Patterson, who is blind, as a bumbling man who didn't know where he was on stage and committed gaffes like holding charts upside down. Many viewers, including the governor, were not impressed with Armisen's continued mockery of Patterson's disability. His office released a statement saying, "The sketch unfortunately chose to ridicule people with physical disabilities and imply that disabled people are incapable of having jobs with serious responsibilities." The recurring bit came to an end when Patterson himself appeared alongside Armisen on Weekend Update. The governor declared that, quote, "jokes that degrade people just for their disabilities are sophomoric and stupid," which received a round of applause from the audience. The cast of Weekend Update also apologized to him. Patterson, it seems, took the previous sketches in stride and even had a chance to add a few zingers of his own.
You know, working in Albany is a lot like watching Saturday Night Live. There's a lot of characters, it's funny for 10 minutes, and then you just want it to go away.
During the 2015 Super Bowl, Toyota released a tearjerker of an ad that showed a father dropping his daughter off to join the Army. The writing staff at SNL clearly found the ad over the top and wrote a spoof starring that week's host, Dakota Johnson. In SNL's version of the commercial, Johnson and Taran Killam play a father and daughter sharing an emotional moment outside of an official-looking building. When the time comes for Johnson to leave the car, however, she doesn't walk in to join the Army. Instead, a truck with ISIS members drives in to pick her up.
Take care of her. Death to America.
At the time, as reported by ABC News, there were several women from the West who were leaving their home countries to join the terrorist group. The commercial parody took aim at both the women joining ISIS and the overly emotional tone of the original Toyota commercial. But for many folks, the joke just didn't land. The New York Post compiled examples of the outrage and support expressed on Twitter. Some viewers called it the most unfunny SNL sketch ever, while another Twitter user said, "Sorry, but no laughing matter. Ever." Some people, however, loved the parody. As one tweet said of ISIS, there's no group more deserving of ridicule. SNL is known for its parody trailers of box office hits, and the popular film Django Unchained was no exception. The sketch, titled Jesus Uncrossed, portrayed the Prince of Peace taking his revenge on the Roman officials that had him crucified in a dramatic, action-filled trailer that featured swords, guns, and lots of blood. Predictably, the sketch enraged some conservative Christians. One think piece posted on Before It's News exclaimed, "This pretend movie trailer is not in the least way funny. It is frankly sick. It is pure, adulterated blasphemy of Jesus Christ, the Son of God and the Savior of mankind." The sketch also angered the Council on American-Islamic Relations. According to The Atlantic, the council called the sketch extremely offensive to Muslims and to all those who believe in his message. Such a distasteful portrayal of a religious figure revered by billions of Muslims and Christians worldwide crosses the comedic line. The folks at SNL likely expected the backlash, and they didn't ask for forgiveness.
No more Mr. Nice Jesus.
According to The Economist, the Federal Communications Commission determined that fleeting uses of words such as penis do not, quote, render the material patently offensive under contemporary community standards for the broadcast medium. SNL took full advantage of that fact in their 1988 Nude Beach sketch, where the word is uttered not once, not twice, but 42 times. The sketch portrays Matthew Broderick attending a nude beach for the first time. He's self-conscious, but according to his friend, played by Dana Carvey, he's got nothing to worry about since everyone goes there to relax. Of course, Broderick's fears are immediately confirmed when a group of men approach Broderick and make comments about his body. While the sketch was a clever way to dance around what was acceptable to say on network television, it also managed to offend plenty of people. The bit, which was co-written by Conan O'Brien, received over 40,000 letters of complaint in an enormous display of public outrage. We'd like to say times have changed, but all evidence leads us to believe the sketch would receive just as much hate if it aired in the 2020s. Although the FCC's censorship of profanity has loosened over the years, SNL still refuses to get too profane. This means that using some words, especially the F word, can get you banned from SNL for life. And while Jenny Slate wasn't the first SNL cast member to utter the F-bomb, she had the misfortune of slipping the word into a phrase during her very first sketch on the legendary show. While Slate's use of the word was a complete accident, viewers still speculated that the incident was the reason she only lasted one season as a cast member. In an interview with InStyle, Slate refuted that claim, saying that profanity was not the reason she was fired from the show. "I didn't do a good job. I didn't click. All I know is it didn't work for me, and I got fired." In 2009, Tiger Woods made headlines when he crashed his car after his wife, Elin Nordegren, broke his rear windows with a golf club. Woods was the kind of athlete whose superstardom eclipsed the sport of golf. Everyone, including folks whose knowledge of the game was limited to putt-putt, could recognize Woods' face on a box of Wheaties. When news of the accident broke, outlets quickly speculated that the incident was an act of domestic violence on Nordegren's part, after she discovered that Woods was cheating. The incident temporarily ended Woods' career and inspired a controversial SNL sketch that made light of domestic violence. In the sketch, CNN is covering a press conference where Woods, played by Kenan Thompson, discusses his personal failings and infidelities. Blake Lively portrays his wife, and the running gag is that she's physically assaulting him every time that CNN cuts away from a live shot of the couple.
There is no other woman for me.
Who's that?
Huh? What?
According to the New York Times, viewers erupted with criticism online. In addition to obvious reasons, the segment was also considered to be in especially bad taste as it was aired just months after Chris Brown reportedly assaulted Rihanna, who was the musical guest on the same night that the Tiger Woods sketch aired.